today's podcast titled Time for Change. We have with us Brent Jeffries from Bierer Meters, William Martin from Think Tank Project LLC, and Kate Wade, editor of Incident Prevention Magazine, and your host today, me, Nick Leonardi from Utility Business Media. I'm the creative and marketing director. We're going to talk about solution to change is time. Time to consider a plan, time to share concerns, time to discuss options, and time to fail safely. Welcome to the podcast, everyone.
Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, Nick.
Hey, Kate.
Hi, Bill.
Hey.
Hey, Brent.
Yeah, I feel like we've all seen each other in one way, shape, or fashion in the last few weeks. And we're going to see each other soon at the conference coming up here May 21st. So that's going to be exciting.
That's going to be fun.
It's going to be a lot of fun. So I'll kick it over to Bill, since this was your brainchild a few weeks ago and we were kind of setting this up. Do you want to talk a little bit about today's topic?
Sure, Nick. So, time. You know, it's the time is an interesting thing. It's the same for all of us, whatever we choose to believe, right? Whatever our gender, wherever. I mean, there's 8 billion people on the planet. We all experience time the same way. Which is kind of interesting, you know. And you got, like, we got Brent on here, and Brent does a really good job going out teaching the skills with the Bierer Meters and how to use them. And we have a whole population that do that. But Brent also is talking to people about how they think. And I think that's kind of what we need to do, is we need to recognize that since we all experience time the same way, maybe there's something there that we can address in system-wide, right? I mean, if we look at some of the incidents that just occurred, we added a little bit of time before the decision was made. The serious incident may not have happened at all. What do you think of that?
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of times we, in the essence of time, we take shortcuts to facilitate the work faster. And that's where some of these injuries and unfortunately fatalities come from. So taking a little bit of time to reflect before you take that shortcut and maybe doing the work how it should properly be done. Or, as Brent and I talked about before, syncing up as a team, taking time as a line crew to sync up before doing the work may alleviate some of these issues in the future.
Yeah, and Brent talks about the huddle. Do you talk about that, Brent?
Yeah, so, Billy, it's great to, again, meet up with you and Miss Kate. And appreciate it, Nick, for setting this all together. When you go around life, you have a graph, and the graph starts at its task. It's what you're doing, and then there's a timeline that comes off of your X and Y axis. There's a timeline that comes off of that, and you all have heard we're having a good time, or man, I'm having a bad time about it, right? So there's this definition that we have inside our minds of what a good time means and what a bad time means. So there's a positive and there's a negative side to time. All right. And I look at it with being with folks like you all today, traveling and being with the line workers around the country, having one of you guys come in like Mr. Billy and doing lecture culture of safety. And then best of all, being with my children and being with my wife, as far as how you're going to define the time. And I like to look at it as quality time. So it's got to have perceived value. It's got to have benefit. It's got to be always positive. There's got to be a quality attribute and an essence of what quality time is. Because no matter what, we all have to go through this matrix right here in our temporary bodies in a construct that time is attached. No, we can't detach from time while we're doing time in the sand glass called our body, right? So I like to look at it as we've got to search and we've got to enable one another to discover what quality time truly is.
Yeah, I think that we don't often think with coworkers or, that's quality time. There's definitely, people you get along with better than others, but you should take quality time out to get to know one another. Ultimately, that'll foster a better, safer work environment by making that quality time. And I think, it kind of goes back to our discussion from Brent, you and I had, is working as a line crew. I don't think a lot of people, I think, just go out and they coexist with each other. It's not quality time. It's just, I'm on this timeline of time, as you said, their x-axis, and we're just there. And we're just trying to get through until we're off. And so, it takes a little more effort. It definitely takes more time to sync up with each other. But I think that if we did that every day and tried to make a concerted effort to do that with one another, we would see less injuries and fatalities because you care about that other person. You have a staked, interest in how they're doing that work, meaning safely or not. And hopefully they do to you as well.
Correct.
I feel like you guys are setting me up because just this morning I was editing our next tailgate topic, and the gentleman who wrote it was writing all about engagement, right? And about how we don't even really have metrics or programs in a lot of companies anymore for field engagement, and how, when you don't know somebody and like they come and visit you at your work site or whatever, and you have no idea who they are, they don't ask your name, they don't spend any time trying to figure out who you are or what you're doing there. Humans, we're social creatures. We don't really care about you if you act like you don't care about us. And I even think about it in terms of like our work, like with you, Bill, and you, Nick. Like, I've known you guys years now. And I know this is like work that we do, but it's also like we have formed relationships over time. Like, we know each other. So it's more fun. And I think the product and like the quality of the product that we're putting out gets better as our connections become stronger.
Yeah.
That's huge. You're so there's a quote, you probably heard it before. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. It sounds a little corny, but it's true, right? So if you show up on my job and I don't know who you are and you don't take, I also want you to listen to how often we're using the word time, not on purpose, but Kate just used the word time, right? But if you don't spend some time creating a relationship, so let me rephrase this. So Kate, you're the lead editor, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you look over lots of things that people write. A lot of people write different things, and a lot of heart dumped out on these articles. That's correct?
Yes.
And what's the product of that? What do you end up with?
Well, I end up, so it's sort of like a team thing. So it's like their expertise, like they've been doing this stuff for all these years, their expertise combined with my expertise on like the writing and editing part. I think together it's a better product because it's both of us working on something together instead of just one person with their set of talents.
But the end result is a magazine.
Eventually, yes.
So that's the product.
Yeah.
So what we're talking about, this time and this relationship thing, we think safety is a thing and that we need to focus on being safe and stopping that incident from ever happening again. But when we create the relationships we need, the product of a healthy, engaged workforce is safe, right? It's engaged, safe, cooperative, happy, innovative, all of those positive words from. So this is, we got this from when Brent and I spoke recently. I got this from Brent probably, but it's a byproduct. And we think it's the thing we're trying to do, but it's not. If you look at us, I often go watch kids skate in a skateboard park, right? They might be wearing safety gear, but they're not trying to be safe. They're trying to become more competent. As our workers.
Yeah.
So I don't know how far down the rabbit hole you want to go today. You can probably, but this whole idea of time. So there's all kinds of neuroscience and cognitive psychologists that talk about time, but not specifically, right? So let's just get on the same playing field. I do anecdotal research all around. I'm always asking people. I annoy people because I ask them stupid questions all the time. And I was just recently asking in a bank, the bank teller who was working on it was a young girl. And I said, can you predict and create your future? She was young. She had to be low 20s. I said, yeah, I think so. And I asked a woman who was probably in her late 50s. I said, did you hear her answer? She said, no, I didn't hear the question. I said, can you predict and create your future? She said, no, not at all. She's, no. And I said, isn't that interesting? I said, I'm not judging either of you, but isn't it interesting? You work in the same bank side by side and you have totally different beliefs about the same thing. And she said, well, what are you talking about? I said, well, we're talking in the present right now. They said, yeah. She said, yeah. I said, so, whoops, that's the past, man. If I were recorded, I'd be able to play it, right? And I said, so do you live in the past or do you live in the present? She said, no, I live in the present. So we could talk about the future, but do we live in the future or the present? She said, the present. I said, so I'm not trying to be Buddhist here, but the Buddhists talk about this a lot, that all there is now. Right now is all there is. And our chance to change something in the future is right now. And if we don't, that time's passed. So I'm finding that there is a lot of people aren't aware of the power we have right now. And if we actually slow down a little bit, so this is Daniel Kahneman. He thinks system one, and he talks about system one and system two. Rest in peace. He died about a month ago. System one thinking is fast and not very accurate. System two thinking is when we slow down. When you're about to get in your car and you turn the key and you say, did I shut off the oven? You just switch to system two. Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, lived through 4 Holocaust camps, died in 1997, was a neurologist and a cognitive psychologist. So there's a space between stimulus and response. In that space is our power to respond, and that response is our growth and our freedom. That space represents time. System 2 represents time. Mel Robbins, who did a TED Talk on the 5-second rule, that our response, immediate response, is often a bunch of chemicals in our body and a biological response. It's a reaction. But if we can slow down a little bit, we can override our biology by counting backwards, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then respond. And then we come up, because our biology might tell us we're hungry, but we don't eat. You could hold your breath for a period of time, right? We could override some of our biology. But if we take the time, for example, the young man's about to go climb a pole. Hey, to the instructor, I'd like to go climb this pole. All right, should be fine. There's no time there. But if instead he asked a question, so, what are you hoping to achieve by climbing that? It buys time for our brain to catch up, right? And if you look at all of the incidents where somebody gets electrocuted, climbs a pole, 22-year-old, 2 years ago in December on a cold 25-below day, climbs a pole to show how good he is because he's an apprentice, I'm going to fix this, goes and dies on the pole. If he had taken a moment with a little conversation between he and we ask a question first, is this tested, dead, and grounded? And if not, and you're still going to do it, then you have other precautions. You're going to say something, Kate. Sorry.
Yeah. I had an experience yesterday that sort of reminded me of the same thing. It was like 80 degrees here yesterday. So my husband and I went kayaking, and we were real stoked because this one tree that was down last summer, either it had been cleared away or the water was high enough. So we were real excited that we were able to float on past it. And like 5 minutes after we were excited, another tree showed up that was down, and there was no getting around this one. But I was thinking, I'm like, if I had been with someone that I didn't know very well, and we had been kayaking together, I'm not sure I would have stopped to talk to this other person about how we were going to approach this. But my husband and I both stopped, and we spent like 5 minutes bullshitting and trying to figure out what are we going to do. And in that time, we figured out, hey, like the main part of the creek right now is real full, but if there's rocks underneath, we can go over on this side and do it this way. And we had a whole little plan formed out. And that's what I think we're talking about, is giving ourselves that time. Because, like, yeah, we could have rushed right into it, but the current was strong. The water is probably 5 feet deep. I'm only 5'3". I don't need to be all the way in there. We gave ourselves time.
So that's awesome. Brent's story about Manny in Arizona, right? He recognized something that Manny said. Was it Manny, right? That's his name?
Yeah, at El Paso Electric Company, Manny.
Yeah.
Apprentice.
He recognized, and what Brent did then was he took the time to use that as a learning opportunity for everyone, right? And if we're an instructor, and we're goal driven, and we're thinking about that thing that we got to get this class over, and we got to get them to hear. We sometimes miss those learning opportunities because we're goal oriented and we have to get this done. But very often, right there in front of us, is an opportunity to slow down for a minute and take advantage of what just happened, so everybody can learn. And I honestly, if we want to look at one tactic to increase time in a conversation, Nick, if I'm asking you a question, if I start with a question, and I honestly, if I use the words what or how, how are you doing today, Nick? And then just listen. And then what's different about today that it's better than yesterday, Nick? In that conversation, we'll catch up, and it'll give us more time for our system 2 brain to come up with what we're talking about.
Yeah, when I hear everyone kind of saying is time is valuable, right? And if we don't give our coworkers, our line crew, the people that we're working with time, we're not valuing them or their safety. And I have one other analogy I thought about as I was on the IPI forum with David McPeak and Danny Rains and Jim Willis this past Friday, and there was a question that came in. I don't remember the exact question but it was about poles and climbing poles and doing a safety check on those poles before they climb them to do the work. And Jim Willis actually had brought up, there is a standard in how many rings in that pole need to be there before it could be utilized as a pole. And those rings, as everyone know, in a tree take time to produce a strong pole. And it's the same thing with your line crew or your coworkers. It takes time to build strength between each other. But if we're not actively doing that every day or care about that, we're showing they're not valuable to us, but they should be, because they have your back and you should have theirs. So it's worth the investment in time.
Yeah. So what if, just look at the number of words we use time here. How many people on this call have heard this? Hey, I'd like to do this. Sorry, there isn't time. Anybody heard that before?
Never.
Right. So
I like I've said that.
I'll tell you, there was a storm. My truck was out with another crew and had to come back yet. And they had 6 sections of wire down just up the road from where our shop was. So another foreman came up and said, hey, jump in. And I said, hey, I don't have my rubber gloves. He says, there's not time to go get that. He says, I got rubber gloves behind the seat. So I watch him open the fuse, but it's a porcelain box fuse that's angled. And there's a loaded line that come out of those when it's angled into the rain can drip. So I have wet leather gloves because I don't have my rubber gloves because there wasn't time. And I'm moving the phases out and a drip went across that. And I got shocked. Both arms contracted. It could have killed me, but it didn't. But if I look back to the root cause, you didn't have your rubber gloves. That's when you look at root cause analysis, they look for that thing. But really, when we work it from the back to the front, we miss all the things that set it up for it to fail, right? And when we change it, if I just waited and got my gloves, none of that other stuff happens, right? So I think if we, as an industry, if we could all agree, let's take a week and just every time we hear time, let's just laugh for a second to slow down. Oh, there's that word, and then see if we're trying to rush something, or if maybe it pays to think that. I mean, these are simple ideas, but I think what we've done is we've made this too complex, which is why nothing's changing. And let the workforce test it. How many times, say, get here, mark down on this little hash mark every time you hear the word time today. And then, is there time pressure? You guys certainly don't ever feel time pressure when your magazines are coming out.
Again, never. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I often ask this question. You ever made a mistake when you were angry?
Wow. Yep. All the time.
Right. So what's really interesting about that is your biology releases different chemicals when you're angry. And those chemicals make you less accurate because they change something. But when we slow down, it releases different chemicals that give you more time, more accuracy because of more time. I don't know. Does that make any sense to anybody, or we just?
It makes sense to me, and all I think about is like, well, what do you have more time for? You have time to let Bill go put on his gloves, or do you have time to like deal with the aftermath of some kind of incident where he's either catastrophically injured or dead?
That's a great point. You often take a shortcut, to save time, but you don't think, worst case, what if something happens? How much time is that going to take? It actually often takes more than the shortcut.
Well, yeah, but if you've never had anything bad happen and you keep doing the shortcut over and over, it just tells you that it's probably going to be okay. But we know about probably, should be, might be, right, Bill?
Maybe, yeah. Red flag.
Maybe. Yeah.
They all mean we don't. They all mean we don't know. But so Brent is now. I know. I've watched some of his videos. He's taking the time to not just talk about the skill, but talk about the human factor, the human relationship, and the way your electric reality that he talks about, what's really going on behind the scenes. And I think we've reached a point where we think we can smart our industry safer. The more training we give them, the smarter they are. But we can't just use the smart. We got to have our heart involved. You know what I mean? Because if the healthiest families are the ones that are connected, and you start to recognize when something's out of sync in your family, right? It's the same thing with the line team that Brent always talks about. I don't want to steal your thunder, Brent, but that's
no, use it, man.
The line team or the line crew. The line team, a football team where a guy's out of sync doesn't win. An orchestra where somebody's out of sync, it sounds terrible, right? And some of these are a little more obvious to see. And then they huddle together to resync all the time. So all these tactics are all around us. But what we're busy doing is trying to figure out that, I've been on that side. Something goes wrong. Okay, we're going to retrain you. And it gets even worse. When you take a lineman or a substation worker or anyone, line worker, line woman, line man, right, line worker, and they do really well, and then all of a sudden they either get fired or punished because they make a mistake, you just change that entire dynamic in that individual, because this is what you're going to hear. I'm going to put my 10 hours in. I don't care. You pay me. I do my 10 hours. I go home. You lose loyalty and you lose the connection, because now you're in order to protect their self-image, you almost have to set themselves aside. I'm just here to work and get my paycheck. You ever heard that before? Right?
Yeah, I've said that before, probably.
When we're working in a high consequence industry, we can't have that. And when we have somebody that it feels that is the disruption to the synchrony, that person's out of sync. Listen, I don't care. You guys do whatever you want. I'm just here for the money, right? But we can't do that in high consequence situations. It's proven not to work. I mean, that's why our statistics think I'm doing. So small things, time's just one small element. There's a whole bunch of things we could do But time is one thing that we can't, once that moment's gone, that moment's gone. We don't live in the past. So when somebody says, hey, and asks you an instructor a question and you're out in the field, you are no longer an instructor, you're part of a team. When you're in a classroom, you're the instructor. When you're doing work, you're part of a team. And everybody has the same stay on a team, right? You may be the instructor and the smartest one there, but when somebody asks you a question, you need to do it what Brent models so well, is use every opportunity for a learning opportunity. And your next move isn't to just say yes or no, it's to ask a question. Because when I ask you a question, how do you think that affected that group when you talk to Manny?
Mm-hmm.
Now, Brent is going to take time for a response, and that whole thing changes everything. You saw it in real time, right, Brent?
Yeah. So, bringing, just kind of piggybacking what you're saying, Billy. I was a couple of weeks ago, I had an amazing opportunity and to interact with some folks and some line crews, the whole company, basically, And the result in just 3 days of interacting with the line crews was just fantastical. And I predicted it was going to be such a manner. And I predicted before I got there that I was going to see immediate results and hear immediate results. And I didn't expect this, but the second day they had me speak in front of their leadership from all the service centers of this particular utility. And so all the higher ups, the leadership, the operations managers, the work methods, superintendents, they were all in this one little room. And there was just a couple linemen and maybe one apprentice. I think that was Manny. But anyways, what's interesting is when I started out with these guys, I immediately said to them, and they were shocked. They were completely shocked. I said, I didn't come here to give you guys some safety training, to give you guys understanding of how to use and flow through proper work methods and best work practices. That's not why I'm here at all. I said, the reason why I came here is so that you and me can have human interaction. That's it. That's why I came here. The byproduct of all that is, I'm going to come and teach you some safety and teach you some how to use tools properly, where to put your body and the why and all that behind it. But those are all byproducts. Safety, that's just a byproduct. But the main reason why I'm here is human interaction. When you go home, you leave this job, you go home and you see your family, you see your wife, your spouse. The main reason why you're home and when you see them, the main reason is human interaction. The hug, the kiss, the words, the dinner, the shower, all that are just byproducts of human interaction. And when you come to work every single morning, you must have an attitude first. And this is it. This is the why you're spending time together as a line team. The time is it's human interaction, period.
Yeah. So the whole idea of time. So I had one of the things we've been working on is roles and concerns. And I've often said, you take the time just before you go to work to form a huddle, like Brett says, and just share, do you have any concerns? I mean, identifying your role is good too, because then you verify that everybody is on the same page. But then any concerns you have, because we talk about the word prediction, right? Remember, if now is all there is, every decision you ever make is in the future. So every decision you make right now is a prediction into the future. So if you're express concerns, you take the time on your line team, any concerns, and you go around the room. You not only the team, you not only create an opportunity to speak up, but a concern is a prediction of an unwanted outcome. And if you don't take the time, you may not become aware of that concern or that prediction. And then it stares you in the face and you're not ready for it, right? But as soon as somebody shares, and I'm not worried about those phases are too close together. Well, Atomic Habits actually pointed out another tactic. And I got this Mike Dornan, who's a friend of mine. We used to work on a crew, and now he's a safety guy. He pointed this out to me this week. I had forgotten that I read it. But in Japan, they did a study. And they called it point and shout. And linemen are kind of already do this, right? But if you express a concern, hey, Brent, those phases are a little close together. So here's what I'm going to do. If you get close, I'm going to point and shout, say, hey, you're getting a little close. But that means you have to respond. Copy, I hear you. Because what's happening now, we got a drop zone. And you guys say, hey, going into the zone, no interaction, no response, just up to the air. We're going into the zone, into the drop zone, expecting that somebody heard you. But if you agree that that's a concern, then you create a point and shout with a response. Three-way communication, right? No jumpers going on, going hot. You just start expand that. And they found in Japan, when they did that, they had 85% less incidents when they actually created an action point and shout. So I think that's, the phase one of what I've been working on is roles and concerns. Phase two is mental rehearsals of worst case scenarios so that you make it possible. I think phase three is point and shout, because we need to act physically in order to have a physical result, right? So, hey, Brent, you're getting a little close to that phase. And then instead of just Brent ignoring me, he says, copy, getting a little close to that phase. Thank you. Imagine that. And I think that could be contagious. So now we talked about time, that we have to take the time for that interaction that Brent's talking about. Does that make sense to you guys? Point and shout.
Yeah.
It sounds fun too, honestly. Like you get to point and shout at things. And
Yeah. Hey, dude, there's a gopher hole right there. Got it. Or that three-way communication. If that concern makes that thing possible, you can avoid the outcome. And here's the upside. That's also the downside. When nothing happens because you do that, there's no data. There's no data on things that don't happen. Yeah. Data, we're a data-driven society. The data we're collecting was in the past. If I change what I'm doing right now, I'm making data for the future. So if I'm looking, what your friend is saying, right? That's why the rearview mirror is smaller than the windshield, because we need to spend more time looking forward than we do backwards. But honestly, in our industry, we spend an awful lot of time looking in that rearview mirror. We got to for the data. We don't want that thing ever to happen again. And had that boat in Baltimore been guided safe passage by a tug, we wouldn't even know the tug captain's name, because there was no hero when nothing happens.
What's the Bill? What's the thing you always say? I believe it's Steven. It's like, without understanding, communication without understanding is.
So I don't know if it's communication. There's a whole bunch of variables there, Nick. Now, I don't even know if it's mine. I hope I'm not stealing.
I feel like it's yours.
But motivation without action is moot, right? So if you can motivate people, but unless I give you something to do, it's just like going to the movie, right? I get excited, I laugh, I cry, I like the movie, I'll go back and watch it again, but work doesn't change. And what happens to workers, we sit them in a classroom and teach them 6 hours of human performance with no translation to what that means at work. What thing are they going to do different at work? And there we taught you human performance, go to work, right? And I've talked to people on LinkedIn just this morning, and I like to lead with empathy. And I love how that sounds. And I think he's of value to his workforce. And I asked that question. So what translates that empathy at work? What are you doing to make that a tangible thing at work? Because the words themselves don't translate to a change. And I think we're seeing evidence of that with 11 years of the same number of serious injuries and fatalities. And then our focus is also on the serious injuries and fatalities, which, if you really want to look at it, in our industry, we can count on losing about 42 linemen a year. That's terrible. But in our, I don't know the statistic. Does anybody know? Do you know the number of our utility people that were suicides last year? Because there's 49,000 suicides in our country every year. 100,000 deaths from alcohol, 140,000 deaths from drugs. And those are more likely to kill our workforce than the work. And if we start communicating better, we will understand each other to a higher level, and we actually might be able to help each other at a higher level.
Yes. So, Bill, when you talked about that higher level, several years ago, when I first met you online, and I bring this up once in a while, and where you were talking about a situation that took place in New York, a couple of linemen lost their lives, and I saw your video, and you talked about situational awareness, and you have shown me and taught me that there's a consciousness awareness as well. And the consciousness awareness, to me, after spending time in the industry training linemen for 8 years everywhere, the consciousness awareness, the lack of consciousness awareness amongst ourselves, and the lack of interconnectivity amongst ourselves is exactly the reason why we have drugs, we have alcohol, we have suicide, we have all these things, we have incidents. And the root cause analysis that we receive, the reports, the root cause analysis, they don't talk about the consciousness awareness. And truly, if you look at all these SIFs, the serious injuries and fatalities, and you go back and you look at the person and you look at the organization. I've been there. I've seen organization and I've seen individuals as persons. And if they would truly look at the consciousness awareness in all these situations, they would actually discover that the root cause analysis is not because of a noun. It is 100%, as far as I'm concerned, the cause of a verb. And that's the human interconnectivity and human interaction lack of.
Explain that a little more.
So I'm kind of going into this right now up here because it's blowing me away. So, like Tesla, I'm just comparing because I've been sharing with linemen how their electrons flow through their bodies, across their gloves, back to Earth. And if they work unsafe, because their bodies, which are temporary, they're made up of earth, dirt and water. So that's the electric reality that I've been training for all these years. But as Tesla discovered this free energy power, the natural free energy power from the ether all around us, that's there. I mean, I basically prove it's there, and how electric theory is not theory, it's a reality. But now I'm starting to come into the mindset and understanding, and thanks to you for your guidance and your help through all this, that there is free energy. There is completely free energy. I actually believe it's more powerful than what Tesla was involved with. I think it's way more powerful. And talk about earth changing and changing our industry as far as the safety and as far as communication and happiness, is that we have a sine wave. We live this time, all right, we live in is a sine wave. And this sine wave, just like electricity, there's a zero crossing. The lowest part is what they call the trough. It's the very lowest part of the negative side of the sine wave. But the positive side above the zero crossing, that's all where good things happen. All right? That's the higher consciousness. And these good things that happen, I use words that are painted in blue, because to me, I look at the blue sky and I'm thinking with the higher consciousness. Every word that describes the negative side, and I've got all these words I'll be sharing with at the IP conference, all these words on the negative side are red, because it's about the human emotions untethered. It's about the human emotions gone wild. okay? And they're not being controlled. And that's where all the bad things happen. So we've got to get to the point to where we ride that sine wave. And we know, and we find this within ourselves. We know if somebody next to us is on the downward trend, we know at that positive side or the negative side of that sine wave. And we know when someone's on that bottom trend and they need to be lifted up to the positive side. So we need that instruction. We need that skill set that honestly, we got rules, we got the training yard, we got all these things that we do, safety stand downs and safety rodeos, but none of them are our colleges, our schools, none of them want to bring this back, this free energy. None of these things want to help us understand between one another that free energy of what it means to be a line team.
So that's a mouthful, but I got to tell you, this is something I'm working on, and it flows right into what you were saying. So we can release that energy or we can suppress it. Those are the two choices. And I talked lately about these two seeds. I carried two seeds with me. I went down to PSE and G, and that was a little weird because that's what was part of my handout: a corn seed and a sunflower seed. And I said, look at these seeds. They're completely different. One is oval and round, and one is little orange corn seed. They are genetically coded to grow completely different plants, just like every other seed on our planet. They are completely different plants, coded differently, look different shapes, different sizes. But the formula to release their potential is exactly the same. The genetic programming to release the potential of every seed on our planet is exactly the same. You have to put them in the right environment at the right season. And when you do that, you can leave and that thing will sprout. It will release its potential into the ground. Or you can suppress it and set that seed on your table. So that energy that exists within that seed, we have the power to release or suppress. And what I ask them to do is look at each other. Look at that person next to you. Does that person have potential? And is there something you can do to help release that potential? And look around. Are people releasing potential in you or suppressing? And honestly, sometimes it takes a little more time to release the potential because I gotta find the right soil where I'm going to get enough rain and enough sunlight and put that seed there. But that energy you're talking about is in all of us, right? And even quantum physics talks about quantum entanglement, how we are all hooked together now, right? I mean, it's there's no question. We're all vibrating at certain frequencies, and we end up talking to people that are at the same frequency, even at parties, they all group together at the same frequency. But are we doing? You're right, 100% right, Brent. I don't know a line school that talks about that. How do we release potential in each other? I don't see that happening. So it's an area we're missing. It's the consciousness piece. It's close. What you're talking about is really hard for people to understand, and a lot of people will drift when they hear this because it's uncomfortable when you start listening to things that you haven't considered, because you get defensive and judgmental. Oh, what's he talking about now? That's nothing I know anything about. And they're 100% right. I went to Africa in February. I brought 6 people, average age 62 and a half, as a social experiment. Mount Kenya is 17,000 feet. And I used the formula that I've been working on to see what would happen, because there was a bunch of different people. I'd be quite a varied group. But everybody pushed the limits of their potential. And they all said this was a life-changing experience because they found the limits of their potential on that trip and were satisfied with that. The goal was not to summit. The goal was to summiting is optional, returning is mandatory. Nobody goes home in a box. That's the first thing we said. And these people that I didn't know all expressed the same, to some to a higher level. One fellow's put together a presentation and flying 3 guides from Africa back here for the presentation for his community. I mean, that's how the level, when we connect, that's the level we can get to, that higher meaning. And honestly, if you look at every serious incident or fatality in our industry, at some point somebody was out of sync. So the leadership skill that we're not teaching is teaching how to get them in sync and then recognizing when there's a disruption to that secret.
Yes.
Then your power is being drained somewhere. That energy, that free energy that you're talking about is there when we're all in sync. I mean, you see it when you watch your favorite football team or you listen to your favorite orchestra. It's just beautiful, right? We have the power to release potential in a piece of wood with holes drilled in it. If we understand how, we're a musician, right? That scalpel is a precision instrument to a surgeon. So we release the energy in everything around us, including people.
Yeah.
That's the part, honestly, that's hard for people to grasp. So the science is complex, but the strategy to do it is really simple.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think you just have to go back to time and understanding. I mean, the whole working with others to release their potential, as you were saying, you know, I learned that in sports. You know, that was something I did growing up and learned how to work as a team and interact socially with other people and communicate with them and, you know, deal with these emotions. That's what these line crews are. They're line teams. But how do we get them to stop, take the time, invest in their coworker the time to understand what triggers them, how they think. I think it's important. It's hard to maybe facilitate, but I think if we don't do something, the numbers aren't going to change as they really haven't been. I think all of us can attest to that. And, you know, we got to do something different.
Yeah. So you, right now, you and Kate are releasing potential, and Brent and I, to get us to let what's on our minds come out. You're gonna, Nick, you're gonna go through it, edit this thing, and how it'll come up with some type of work that hopefully somebody will trigger somebody. You know, I wrote on ambulances for years, and we had a $25,000 monitor defibrillator, and we used it very seldomly, but it was there for what we needed.
Uh-huh.
You're going to release this. It's going to ring true with somebody and change something about them. You need to do it with across a bigger scale. But Kate, for example, releases potential in my writing because I can give her something that's not great, and she can help me shape it into something that's better.
Well, we plant seeds, right? I mean, this podcast is a seed. Kate's articles are seeds. You guys speaking at the conference and giving your thoughts and what you believe are seeds. And yeah, day one, it may not sprout into a 100-foot giant piece of corn or whatever, but not that they're 100 feet, but you know, time and energy, someone may come across that and be like, oh, wow, you know, and get relevance from it, you know?
I think we grossly underestimate our power to help each other raise to that higher level. And what we do is we create blockades and we allow the environment around us to shut us down.
Yes. That's it.
And really, we have that potential in those seeds. I mean, just think about it. Everything on earth is made of the same element, even us. And we know the formula to release the potential in every seed on the planet. And so do we really think we're designed that to know? I mean,
so yes, you know, Kate, I'm going to send you a writing I did a few weeks ago. Billy read it. It's called, and this was a something that was inspirational when I received it. So I just simply wrote it down. It didn't take me very long to write it all down, this article, but it's called Rediscover Your Superhero. And it's a formula to help folks learn that they truly are, as Bill always says, they truly are geniuses. All right. So let's take it to another level. You all are truly, Kate, Nick, Billy, I know you already know this. but you all are truly, you have superhero powers within you. As those seeds, their genetic code had those same powers to create life from something that seemingly looked dead. Okay? We're in the flesh body right here. And in time, this flesh body dies. Okay? Kind of like the seed. Okay? But out of that, when you stop thinking about self, you stop thinking about the paycheck, you stop thinking about what's in it for me. When you stop that, because guess what? That's where unhappiness comes. That's where you get to the negative side, the bottom of the trough. But when you start thinking about that superhero power that's in you and others around you, then there's a team, there's a connection, everybody's happy. And guess what? The byproduct of that is you have a job, you're getting paid, but those are just byproducts. They're not even important things, but they happen, and that's great. Wonderful. But in the meantime, let's stay in the positive side and think about one another. And let's think about and look for that superhero that's inside of each one of us, Kate, Nick, when you and I had that podcast several weeks ago, dude, I saw you, and we're thousands of miles apart like we are today. Billy, you and I experience this on the phone all the time. This is just normal for us because we recognize each other. But it's in you, Nick. It's in you, Kate. And you all have those same superpowers. And you guys can just be that shining light amongst folks all around you. And and as much as our society, like you said, Billy, as much as our society, politics, education, religions, all these things, and it's sad, it's so sad, all these things, they try to, like you said, Billy, suppress. And they try to control and disengage and disconnect you and us from that superpower that we have. So if we just turn off those things, which I've turned them off, all right? Because I recognize their intent. And now I see the good in everybody, even the meanest person. And it's funny finding that good and grabbing a hold of them, and they don't even realize you're doing it. And you grab a hold of them and you lift them back up to the positive side. And our leadership needs to learn this. Our leadership needs to watch, like Billy, you're so good at this, key words, key body movements. And we've got to recognize this communication. It doesn't have to be spoken. It doesn't have to be heard. But you can see this happen. You can see the lights pop in people's minds. And you see that you just brought them to Luke. You know, which side is Luke going to go? The dark side?
Right.
Okay. Or is he going to work for the force be with you? We have that. I'm not kidding. We actually do have that. And there is a dark side. And we have to recognize that, because a lot of times that dark side is not out here away from us. A lot of times that dark side that causes us to live and dwell in the negative side, we're unhappy, unfulfilled, and quite frankly, we get sick, we get cancers, we get diseases. We need to be happy, and then our health level is the highest it can be, and we need to learn to find that superhero, rediscover it, because we were born with it, but we didn't know that. They don't want to tell us that. So just like they shut down Tesla, all right, with that free energy, the same thing's happening with the free energy that we have with one another today. Our system wants to shut it down, but we need to rediscover it. Forget the system. If you want to talk negative about this, that's fine. It's a waste of time. Let's talk positive about what we can do today in this time to make it better.
So Kate's, that's an article for Kate, I hope. So I got an analogy, and I'll try to be short because I know we've been talking a long time. But you talk about this superhero. I want you to think about this. We have a planet with 8 billion people, right? There's 195 countries, 7,139 languages.
Mm-hmm.
And every human that's born on the planet speaks their language fluently by age 5. Nobody teaches them the language. Your brain teaches you the language in order to survive. There's no instructor. There's no, today you will learn this language, right? And some of them learn more than multiple languages if their parents are multilingual.
Mm-hmm.
That's the superpower that we have. And then we forget that, like, well, we have to teach them this, we have to teach them that. But we are all connected at that level, and we have that ability. And this is the analogy I heard recently. So this whole idea of quantum entanglement, even though we're in these bodies right now, our energy, like I know, Brent, if I've talked to you about this, we can speak on a cell phone to somebody on the other side of the country and make them smile in an instant.
Mm-hmm.
Right? From words that are vibrating their eardrums and a brain that's interpreting the vibration as something that will make them smile. I mean, if that's not a superpower, tell me what is, right? And then we think of, this was a teacher telling me, explaining death to their 12-year-old. And they took an ice cube and they brought it up to the lake. They said, life is like this ice cube. This ice cube is the same as everything around you right now, but it's in the form of an ice cube. And I'm going to drop it in the lake and see, you can still see it. Let's watch it for a few minutes. Oh, look, it's getting smaller. Oh, it's gone. Where did it go? Where did that ice cube go? It's everywhere.
I thought you were going to say life is like a box of chocolates, but
Yeah, you know, I'm going to get it.
analogy as well.
Oh, Billy Gump. Yeah.
Yeah, Billy Gump.
No, wow, but think about that. So that ice cube, once it melts, it is now everywhere in that lake, right?
Yeah.
It's the same as we are. We're everywhere now. We're just contained here, and we think. So Daniel Kahneman said, this is a quote. He said, "We think what we see is all there is," and that's what we do. We try to teach that way. I'm looking at you, and you're not getting this. What's wrong with you? Well, it's nothing wrong with the student. We just haven't figured out how that student learns yet. It's an instructor problem, right? But we blame people all the time when they don't get it. You don't get it. Well, it's not their fault they don't get it, right? Because we haven't asked the right question or found out what they need to get it. And we do that to ourselves all the time, Dude, are you slow? And I was beat up as I came from a generational alignment where that was the MO, right? You if you survive getting beat up through the apprenticeship, then you'll survive, right? Because they treat you, and some of that you see it in families. If you're abused as a child, you end up fighting, trying to abuse your own children, right? Because you're too tough on them or whatever. But it's a choice, just like breathing, or our biology, and that's the whole idea of our consciousness that Brent was talking about. We are not our biology. Our biology is a mix of hormones that are meant to protect us. And when I react and triggered, I'm going to react and say something I don't want to say. And then the voice in my head is going to say, oh, crap, I shouldn't have said that. But if we are not our emotion and we are not the voice in our head, we are the one who's listening. We're the one who hears the voice in our head. So that means Viktor Frankl was right, Kahneman was right, and Mel Robbins is right. There's a space. We recognize that we are not our emotion. I now control my response. And instead of reacting as my biology, I react as from who I am. And my reaction should be something to help improve the person, help the person, or better yet, the first thing you do is ask a question. That gives you time, even more time. So if I were to say anything about this whole podcast, if you want to try something, try making your first, if somebody asks something or pisses you off, try starting with a question and see what happens. And ask that question in the tone that you choose. Brent tells me, Billy Martin, you're full of crap. And I'm just going to smile for 3 seconds. An uncomfortable pause. Brent, I'm really glad you're comfortable enough to tell me that way. I don't think I'm full of crap, but I'm really curious and interested why you might think so. Tell me more about that. Because I don't need to get defensive. I don't think I'm full of crap, but I'm wondering why you might. I mean, that's responding for me, not for my emotion.
Yeah. I would say, we're getting on an hour here, and I'd like to take time to give everyone a reflecting thought of, what they find valuable, maybe a key learning nugget, out of this session that we did. And I would say, the one I thought I liked was, we all value time. We all think time is valuable. And if we don't give time to our coworkers, then what is that really saying to them? Does that create an environment where they can be safe and share concerns and be a part of a team? Mm-hmm. What about you guys? We'll give it over to Brent and hand it off.
Good question, Nick. I appreciate it. Here's how I look at it. Is we're talking about the time. Remember our tasks? We have tasks to do. That's your X. Here's your Y, and we'll call that time. And here's your axis, starting point. And then the end of the graph we come to is when we leave our body. So time's over. Time's up. The sand in an hourglass, guess what? It's empty. All right.
Yep.
But how I like to share is I like to share in that my sharing as far as safety and the training and human interaction has nothing to do with time. Now think about this, okay? Because time for a change, all right? So in other words, what I'm saying, and Billy, you're going to get this. Actually, I got to go that way. You're going to get this, Billy. Okay, time for a change. Here's how I see it, and it's still developing, but you guys are going to get it because I get it, and I'm not that smart, okay? But we need to share our lives with one another, no matter what we're doing. So it's not based on time. In other words, we need to share quality and interaction to such a degree that when time's up for us, everything we shared and done as far as the task line compared to the timeline, everything we've done, the tasks, they are multiplied after our time's up. And everything we shared will continue past our time inside and embellishing and embossing the lives of others past our tasks, even greater, and past our time, even greater. You see? So that's the time we need to change is not time based on the physical realm, because that's where we're all messed up. That's where we make our mistakes. We need to base our time on the higher consciousness. It's not a physical realm, but it's a higher consciousness realm with one another. Yeah.
That's scary, Brent. Well, I like how you think. Okay.
Nick, can you repeat the question? I want to make sure that.
So what learning nugget did you take away from our conversation today that you found either most interesting or valuable?
Yeah, I'm really stuck on this whole engagement part. I mean, I'm not thinking about the time piece maybe as much as I should be, but just about some of this stuff has got to be about getting back to basics and what we as humans do best. We're really good at making up a lot of stuff that we need to do, but I think the relationships that we have with each other are so important. And I'm a super introverted person. I can't spend a ton of time with other people, but I know even for myself how important it is to have close friendships, or even today. So Nick, I got an email this morning. It said that this Zoom was canceled, right? Because of however I was added on to it. And I was like, oh, it got canceled. And I was like, guess I have a free hour or whatever. But then I was like, I'm just going to ask Nick, because I know Nick. I don't really know what's going on. If it had been somebody that I didn't know, I would not be here right now. I just assumed that it was canceled, not asked anything, gone on about my day. But because Nick and I have a good working relationship that we continue to work on, we can have conversations. I can text him and be like, hey. So I really think that getting back to those kinds of things, and, obviously, we have this like social reality now, so it's like you have access to all these people all the time, but I think it's replacing, and not in a good way, the human to human, like the in-person day-to-day interactions. So yeah, that's my takeaway.
The most connected ever, and yet the most disconnected ever.
Yeah, it's like lonely connection. It's like, yeah, you got all these people, but I'm like, I don't feel fulfilled by this. I want to be with like people, even if they're not like me, they don't agree with me. I like being in a group with people and having those conversations and connections.
Yep.
Yep. Yeah, so I'm complete.
All right, Bill, you're up.
I just appreciate the chance to talk, because honestly, a lot of what happens to me happens later after these. Like I'll be working and then I have these thoughts that'll enter my mind without my permission. Something Brent will say will enter my mind without my permission and change something. And I'll go, oh, yeah. And then we have those little flashbulb moments. And I think these types of conversations generate that in a lot of people. If I were to look at the one thing that really, there's so much in these podcasts that it's hard to just pick one thing, but the reality is that I hate that phrase, so I'm going to stop using it. But
at the end of the day,
they're like that. There's a difference between our consciousness and our biology. And I think, to Brent's point, we don't like to think about that because it's a little fuzzy, right? But our biology started the week before our mother was born, because all the ingredients were in your mother to form the egg that you came from the week before your mother was born. And then at some point, on an average, women get 1 million eggs. So if you're here, you were one of those 1 million eggs. That's your biology. And at some point, that egg is fertilized. And the odds of that egg being fertilized is another huge, rare opportunity. And then at some point in the biological development of that fertilized egg, your consciousness shows up. And in other words, what I heard this said once, when we die, we eventually fall asleep, never to wake up. But when your consciousness shows up, we wake up having never been asleep. So at some point, we enter that room of life. And then at some point later on, we can see the exit door. Mm-hmm. And the physical body we're in does all that stuff, and it is responsible for keeping us successful and alive. So everything you tell your brain to do, it does. Everything. But it's your consciousness that's telling it what to do. Right? Now, physicists might argue with me on that. And I'm fine with that because he doesn't know the answer either. That's why he would argue. Right? So if you can understand your consciousness that shows up, wakes up having never been asleep, it's the same one that falls asleep never to wake up, your body, we're working tandemly with a biological being that is chemical soup. And that chemical soup changes with experience. If it's a fight or flight mechanism, it's releasing one chemical. And if it's love, it's a different chemical. Trust is oxytocin, for example. And we think the emotions are private to us. They are not. So we don't need words. They connect. As a matter of fact, just for the listening audience, if you wonder how women synchronize their menses, it's because they leak progesterone, which is a biological amount of a hormone, and into each other if they're working close. Well, cortisol does the same thing. If you're working next to somebody who's stressed all the time, you're going to be stressed because they're leaking cortisol. But when we start to recognize that, our consciousness can override that. Mm-hmm. Right? It can't override the biology. The biology is going to happen without it. But how we react to the biology. So I think that my take home is I don't think we went at, like when I started in the bank about, can you predict and create your own future? And the older woman said no, and the young person said, yeah, I think so. maybe we should start looking at getting us all on the same page as a line team or as a substation team, so that we all come from the same. We can have different religions and all these other things, but our consciousness is the same whether we have an opinion about it or not. We all learn those languages whether we choose to or not, right? It's Kahneman said, you can't think of the negatives, right? If I ask you, don't think of a white bear, right? You have no choice. So there's a lot of things that our brain takes in that we have no choice. So let's choose what it takes of the things. That I don't know, that's a long-winded consciousness, I think, is what I'm taking back. There's actually a huge difference in what we think we experience and what we actually experience. Now, I'm a little biased when it comes to women. If you look at a woman CEO and a male CEO, the woman CEO has experienced most likely a different reality than the male CEO. And because of that, women, whether you have children or not, you're designed that way. Men are not designed that way. They're two different designs. So let's take, for example, a woman who's also been a mother, or a male who's not. He's been a father, but he never gave birth to children. I see the women CEO as having a wider bandwidth of skills than the man. That's just, they see life a little bit differently. I worked with a woman on a line crew for a number of years named Melissa, and we worked together really well. And I noticed when she was present on a line team, it changed the whole team. So I think women have a power that we don't give them credit for. And the sad thing is, if you look at the industry, women operate 16.9% of this industry. So you're already less than a 0.2% of the world that's in this industry. And now you're 16.9% of that. Women occupied a very small point, and I think there's a space for them to occupy a bigger piece in the future.
I agree as a woman.
Yeah. You might be biased. Okay.
I probably.
Well, I thank you guys and gals for your time. And
Just the one gal.
well,
Yeah. Sorry, you're gonna have to edit that. I just totally screwed that up for you.
Oh,
So my bad.
so thank you everyone for your time, and we look forward to seeing everyone at the conference. Both Brent and Bill will be speaking, and Bill has a pre-conference workshop to check out, and Kate will be with us as well, so make sure to track her down, and we'll see you guys next time.
We'll see you in Florida, you guys.
Appreciate Kate, Mr. Nick.
Great.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Billy.
Let safety shine by joining us for the IP Utility Safety Conference in Orlando, Florida, this May 21st through the 23rd. Register today at utilitysafetyconference.com.
The views, information, and opinions expressed during this podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of Utility Business Media and its employees. It is strongly recommended that you discuss any actions or policy changes with your company management prior to implementation.